The widow they pitied. At the funeral, people spoke in hushed tones, leaning closer to one another as though grief itself demanded quiet, as though sorrow could be measured by how softly one whispered. "What a devoted wife, look at her, she's completely shattered," they murmured, casting careful glances toward the woman standing beside the coffin. She did not cry loudly, did not collapse, did not cling to anyone for support, and that, in their eyes, only confirmed the depth of her pain. Her stillness seemed sacred, her silence dignified. No one questioned it. No one looked closer. No one noticed how, as she leaned over the body of her husband, her fingers slipped with practiced precision into the inner pocket of his jacket, leaving behind a small photograph, a photograph of another woman, the one for whom he had betrayed her. That was her final gesture, quiet and invisible, yet heavier than any farewell. The woman in the photograph was named Vanessa, and long before this day, long before the coffin, the black scarves, and the rehearsed sympathy, she had entered their lives like a fracture in glass, silent at first, almost imperceptible, yet destined to spread until everything shattered. The town they lived in, Pine Hollow, was the kind of place where nothing truly changed, where routines were inherited like family heirlooms, where people aged in the same houses they were born in, and secrets, if they appeared at all, rarely survived for long. Vanessa did not belong to that world, and from the moment she arrived, the balance of it shifted. She did not lower her gaze or attempt to blend in. She moved with a calm certainty that unsettled people, as though she carried with her a past too heavy to hide and too sharp to soften. There was no apology in her presence, no hesitation in her shuggy, and certainly no shame. Emily noticed her almost immediately. At first it was instinct, something wordless and uneasy that tightened in her chest whenever she caught sight of the stranger near their home. Soon it became habit, then obsession. She would stand behind the thin lace curtain in her kitchen, barely breathing, watching, as Vanessa lingered by the fence as if drawn there by something invisible. She never knocked, never called out, never crossed the line into the yard. She simply stood, patient and composed, as though waiting for something that was already hers. Tall, dressed in deep, wine-colored tones that clung to her figure, her dark hair shifting with the wind like a living shadow, she seemed almost unreal against the dull backdrop of the village. Every movement she made felt deliberate, measured, as if it carried a message that did not need words. Emily tried to ignore it at first, tried to convince herself that it meant nothing, that she was imagining things, that life could not unravel so quietly. But then came the encounters, too precise to be coincidence, too frequent to dismiss. On the narrow road leading to the store, near the well, by the post office, Vanessa would appear, always at the right moment, always in the same calm, unhurried way. And when Emily walked beside her husband, Michael, holding onto his arm just a little tighter, Vanessa never stepped aside. She would walk straight toward them, her gaze fixed only on him, her expression softening just enough to suggest something unspoken, something intimate. "Good afternoon, Michael," she would say in a low, velvety voice, and in that moment, Emily would feel herself disappear, as if she had been erased from the scene entirely. It was not open hostility, not even rudeness. It was something far more precise, more calculated. It was exclusion, deliberate and absolute. The tension grew slowly, almost imperceptibly, like pressure building beneath the surface of still water. Emily held herself together in public, forcing her face into composure, refusing to give the village the spectacle it quietly craved. But inside, something twisted tighter with every passing day. The breaking point came in a narrow alley behind the old sheds, where the air smelled of damp wood and rust. Emily confronted her there, words spilling out in a rush, sharp and desperate, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. She spoke of her home, her children, her life, everything that stood on the verge of collapse, and begged, in the end, not with dignity, but with raw, unfiltered need. Vanessa listened without interrupting, her expression unchanged, and when Emily finally fell silent, breathless, and shaking, she let out a soft, almost amused laugh that echoed in the confined space like something chuzdaya, lishnaya. "Do you really believe," she said slowly, "that desperation can hold a man in place?" There was no cruelty in her tone, only a quiet certainty that made the words cut deeper. "You should stop humiliating yourself like this." And with that, she stepped past her as if nothing had happened. After that, the war moved inside the house. Michael changed, not suddenly, but steadily, as if something in him was shutting down piece by piece. He spoke less, laughed rarely, avoided eye contact, and carried himself with a kind of exhaustion that Emily could neither understand nor forgive. Conversations turned into accusations, explanations into arguments, silence into something heavy and suffocating. Emily's fear grew into certainty, and that certainty into something harsher, more destructive. She questioned him constantly, watched him closely, interpreted every delay, every glance, every pause as proof of betrayal. When words failed, she reached for the children, invoking them not out of love but out of desperation, turning them into shields and weapons at once. Michael tried at first to reason with her, to defend himself, to restore what was slipping away, but eventually he stopped. Not because he was guilty, but because nothing he said mattered anymore. Trust had already been buried, and without it, even truth sounded like a lie. The turning point came on a cold, rain-soaked afternoon when the roads had dissolved into mud and the sky hung low and heavy over the fields. Michael and Vanessa were returning from a distant farm, the truck moving slowly through the gris, the sound of the engine blending with the steady rhythm of rain against the windshield. For a long time, neither of them spoke, the silence thick and almost tangible, until Michael finally broke it, his voice low and strained. He spoke not with anger, but with something closer to resignation, admitting how deeply the tension at home had worn him down, how exhausting it had become to exist in a constant state of evinania. Vanessa listened quietly, and when she spoke, her voice carried none of the sharpness Emily had come to expect. She spoke of fear, of love, twisted into something unrecognizable, of the way people cling to what they are afraid to lose until they destroy it themselves. It was the first time Michael saw her not as a threat, but as someone carrying her own weight of pain. They stopped by the river, where the water moved slowly under a gray sky, carrying fallen leaves away without resistance. There, sitting on a fallen tree, trunk damp with rain, Vanessa told him her story, not dramatically, not for sympathy, but with a quiet detachment that made it all the more devastating. She spoke of her first husband, her childhood love, the life they had planned, the child they had been waiting for. She spoke of the fire that took him, of the call that ended everything, of the funeral where another woman appeared with a child and claimed a place in a life Vanessa had believed was hers alone. She spoke of betrayal, not loud and obvious, but hidden, known by others, silently accepted, leaving her as the only one who had not known. And then she spoke of the loss that followed, The child she never had, the future that vanished, the emptiness that remained. By the time she finished, there was nothing left in her voice, no anger, no tears, only a quiet, exhausted absence. Something shifted in Michael then, something small but irreversible. What followed was not a sudden decision, not even a conscious choice, but a gradual surrender to something he no longer had the strength to resist. Their closeness grew out of shared silence, shared understanding, shared loneliness, until the distance between them ceased to exist. The first moment they crossed that line felt less like passion and more like escape, a brief, fragile relief from everything that had been weighing them down. And once that boundary was broken, there was no returning to what had been before. The affair lasted only a month, but it carried the weight of something much longer, something that seemed to exist outside of time. For Michael, it became a space where he could breathe again, where he was not accused, not judged, not reduced to someone else's fears. For Vanessa, it was something more complicated, a mixture of warmth and guilt, of longing and restraint, of something she both needed and knew she could not keep. In the end, it was she who decided to leave, not out of indifference, but because staying would have meant разрушение, not only for Emily, but for herself as well. She told him simply, without drama, that she was leaving, that there was nothing for her there anymore. Michael reacted with a desperation that surprised even him, speaking of following her, of abandoning everything, of starting over somewhere far away, but the words sounded hollow even as he said them. Life was not something that could be erased and rewritten so easily. He never got the chance to try. That same evening, his heart stopped. Suddenly, without warning, without time for regret or explanation, the story ended for him. But not for them. The funeral came quickly, heavy with expectation, filled with people who believed they understood what had happened. Vanessa came too, driven by something she could not name, a need to see him one last time, to confirm the reality of it, to say goodbye in a way that made sense only to her. But she never crossed the threshold of the house. Emily stood in the doorway, not broken, not grieving, but filled with a cold, controlled fury that left no room for doubt. She did not shout, did not create a scene. She simply told Vanessa to leave, her words quiet but absolute, closing the door not only to the house but to everything that had existed between them. Later, at the cemetery, when the crowd began to disperse, Emily approached her. What she said then was not anger, not accusation, but something far more devastating. Truth. She confessed that she had known, that she had watched, that she had followed every step, every message, every meeting. And then, almost casually, she revealed something else, something buried in the past that connected them long before they had ever met. It had been her years ago who had found Vanessa's life and shattered it, who had set in motion the chain of events that had led to everything that followed. What Vanessa had believed to be coincidence, fate, tragedy, it had all been part of something much more deliberate. By the time Emily finished speaking, there was nothing left to say. No victory. No justice. Only ruin. Vanessa sank to the ground, the cold earth soaking through her clothes as the world around her seemed to dissolve into silence. The rain fell steadily, blending with the last traces of something that might once have been tears, and the wind carried the sound of distant voices away, leaving her alone with the weight of everything that had been lost. The story had not ended in anger or in love, but in something far more final, in emptiness. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. Thank you for listening.